Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again on The Word. Today, Richard, I thought we would get into a series of discussions over the next several weeks. And the first one's going to start off with, in quotation marks, the nuns. And that's N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N.
All right.
And part of the reason I wanted to do a series, it's going to be we'll be presenting several episodes, probably over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks, whatever. And it's only going to be one subject in mind: the common enemy to us all.
The common enemy to us all. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And Christian, non-Christian, Protestant, Catholic, whoever it may be, if you're a human being and born on this planet,
Yes.
we have a common enemy.
All right.
Okay? So that's really, but I want to start off with the nuns first because it was a Pew Research survey that was done. And so I wanted to give some credibility to what we're going to discuss.
Okay.
So I just don't want it to just be from Alan and Richard. It's going to be based on some research that people have done. And the purpose of this is to inform those who are attentive. I always go back to that first word we did in the first episode we did, but if you're attentive to this, it's going to be confirming and perpetuating our belief on current issues within our culture. So as we discuss these subjects like the nuns, and we're going to be talking about suffering and evilness and Satan, these are subjects that are going to come up that actually look at the current culture, where we're at right now. And there's nothing unique to where we're at right now in human history. This has been going on for millennia. But I guess I felt like we needed to accentuate what our culture is going through right now, to use it as an example to draw out what we really need to be seeing at like a 30,000 foot view, rather than, because when you get bogged down in the trenches, you don't see the big war that's going on. You just see what's right in front of you, right in the here and now.
In your personal space, that's where you're most affected and influenced by that.
Right. And, also to recognize issues that are arising, within our basic cultural beliefs, if you're not already aware. And to recognize an unseen enemy which dwells among us and within us.
Now that's a good concept right there.
Okay, we're going to bring that out over the next several weeks. And also by recognizing the enemy, therefore knowing how to deal and apply lessons to our everyday life. Because I think a lot of times we just kind of go through life and we're trudging through and we're doing the best we can do. And we wonder why we're not getting anywhere. Well, there's reasons why.
Yes, there's a reason why there's obstacles and opposition and okay.
Right. So we're going to bring about several thought-provoking subjects that need to be exposed to the light, which are in darkness right now. So here again, we're going to talk about the nuns, suffering, evil, Satan. So this article, this has been on the nuns, and some people who are on Facebook or media outlets, they've already heard about it. And I was curious as to where the research was coming from and the accuracy of it, okay? And if it reflects who we are as a nation and the direction it's going in. So I looked up this Pew Research study. It was brought to my attention on a media outlet, which I'm not going to name. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So I looked it up, and I went to the Pew Research Center survey that was conducted on July 31st through August 6th of 2023. So that was this past year. It's a recent survey. And this survey was taken among 11,201 respondents who are members of the Centers America Trends Panel, ATP. The survey included interviews with 3,317 religious nuns. Out of that, 658 were atheists, 678 were agnostics, and 1,981 respondents who described their religion as nothing in particular.
I see.
So these are the people who have taken the survey and responded to questions of the Pew survey.
Okay.
So in addition to the July 31st through August 6th, 23 survey, this analysis also draws on a variety of other ATP surveys conducted in recent years, as well as on the Center's National Public Opinion Reference Survey. And I'm not going to read you the acronym, but anyway.
Okay.
And so all this credit, what we're going to read and cover, the credit, which I'm going to show on the screen below, is a closer look at how atheists, agnostics, and those who describe their religion as nothing in particular see God, religion, morality, science, and more. And I'm giving all the credits to the people that took the survey.
Okay.
Now, if we don't look at this, okay, if we don't look at the atheists, the agnostics, and what they believe and what they don't believe, and we're called as Christians, okay, to
Yes.
do the Matthew 28, spread the good news of the gospel into our local community, Judea, and outer parts of the world. If we don't know what these people believe, who they, what they believe in or not believe in or whatever, then it's hard to minister to folks. I mean, we can spread the good news, but, it helps give us a little bit of discernment.
What are we dealing with, and who are we talking to?
Right,
What are
right.
their
And,
preconceived notions? Yeah.
right, and so I'm going to go ahead and give the Pew Research reference down on the screen down there, or at the very end of the episode.
Okay. I want to know who these nuns are, and they're basically, you just laid it out there, agnostics, atheists, and nothing in particular.
Correct.
So-
Correct. Okay. So who are the nuns? How are they defined? So in the survey, this fell under Chapter 1. And I'm going to go ahead and put my glasses on. Just to kind of read this in Chapter 1.
All right.
Today, about 28% of U.S. adults are religiously unaffiliated, describing themselves as either atheist, agnostics, or nothing in particular. Pew Research Center, we get lots of questions about this group, often called the nuns. What do nuns believe? What are they exposed to religion? What are their views about science, growth, good or bad for society, and why? So most nuns believe in God or another higher power, but very few go to religious services regularly.
Oh, so they have some belief, but they're not affiliated with any of the mainline.
Right, they don't associate with it.
Okay.
I can make some speculations as to why, but we're going to talk about the survey here. Most say religion does some harm,
Oh,
but many also think it does some good.
okay.
They are not uniformly anti-religious. Most nuns reject the idea that science can explain everything, but they express more positive views of science than religiously unaffiliated Americans. And I've got a little chart there that shows in 2007, the nuns were around in the 16% range.
Okay.
And then by 2023, it's jumped up nearly 12% to 28%.
Oh,
So from
that-
2007 to 2023,
it's more than doubled. That
more
count.
people have become the nuns,
The nuns, yes.
unaffiliated.
They're not affiliating with the big denominations like they once did. That trend is, they're turning away from that, aren't they?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I'm going to give you another little chart here that I'll put up on the thing. But who are the nuns? How are they defined? In public opinion surveys, people who answer a question about their religion by saying they are atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular are combined into a category called religiously unaffiliated. Now, this little pie chart that they've got 17% atheist, 20% agnostic, and 63% nothing in particular.
Mm-hmm.
In our latest data, which is what I just said, atheists and agnostics on average have more education than religiously affiliated Americans. By contrast, people who describe their religion as nothing in particular tend to have lower levels of education attainment than religiously affiliated U.S. adults.
All right. The atheists and agnostics then tend to be more educated.
Yeah.
And they've
Your college-educated people, the people, the teachers, that sort of thing. I found that interesting.
That is interesting. There's a correlation. The more educated you are, the more atheist is a position that says they declare there is no God, and agnostics say you can't be sure.
Right.
So with their education,
You know what that reminded me of is when Jesus was here,
Uh-huh.
and he didn't go to the Pharisees and teach. I mean, he did teach in the temples,
Well-
but he teached the masses, the common laborers, the farmers, the fisher people. They were the uneducated for the most part. You know, they didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
They were more receptive to Jesus and his message
Yeah.
than the elite, the educated.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what I thought of anyway. All right, the next one is, why are nuns non-religious? Well, when asked directly why not religious, 2/3 of the nuns say they question a lot of religious teachings or don't believe in God. Many also brought up criticisms of religious institutions or people, including 47% who say that one extremely or very important reason why they are not religious is that they dislike religious organizations. And 30% say bad experiences they've had with religious people had explained why they are non-religious.
Oh, that was a problem with the Pharisees in their day.
Yes, yeah. To me, we've taught, and I think it's come through in our episodes on the Word, about, Christ is relational.
Yes.
It's not a religion, it's a following.
Yes.
And when you come to a religious organization, my first thought is people see that pharisaical background. They're not being, they're not feeling the Spirit of the Lord. They're not seeing followers of Christ. They're seeing followers of my program in the church. They're seeing, follow me, how good a teacher I am, or how good a pastor or minister or rabbi, whoever it is. And so that indirectly is turning people off
Yes.
rather than finding an experience with a one-on-one or a small group. They're not finding the experience that they expect to be associated with a religious belief or a Christian. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Typically, the religious organization will want you to conform to their doctrinal statements and fit in with the way they conduct themselves.
Yeah.
They call it legalism to some extent.
Right.
And,
right. And there's a balance there between who do we let into the church versus becoming a member versus, there's a lot of questions there.
Yes.
And a lot of, back and forth about what we should do. Well,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and continue on with the survey, but
Okay.
are nuns less involved in civic life than people who identify with a religion? That was an interesting question. So I've got a little chart about that too. By a variety of measures, religious nuns are less civically engaged and socially connected than people who identify with a religion.
Oh, I see. Yes.
On average, they are less likely to vote, less likely to have volunteered lately, less satisfied with their local communities, and less satisfied with their social lives.
Oh my, that's an interesting connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember back to the days when I was a nun, essentially.
Right.
And I didn't volunteer for anything. I didn't.
You
I
didn't
wasn't
see
engaged.
a civic duty or
No, I didn't think about others much. I was just about myself, and I remember that.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Okay. And there's a lot of information. I mean, you guys can go back and look at the survey yourself, but I just wanted to point out a few things. Question 4 was, are all nuns non-believers? I love this one. Not all nuns are non-believers. They are far less likely than religiously affiliated Americans to say they believe in God as described in the Bible, but most do believe in God or some higher power. Just 29% reject the notion that there is any higher power or spiritual force in the universe.
I meet a lot of people who express a belief in God,
Right.
but it's not the God of the Bible.
Right. It's like their own notion of what they believe. And I think that's based on the way they were raised or their environment that they're brought up in or who they hold in esteem, like a person or a televangelist is giving them wrong information or they've just ascribed to wrong information and now they have this belief of this God that they have formed in their mind. It's kind of like going to school and having a bad teacher telling you something wrong.
Right.
And now you've got this belief stuck in your head, and it's not the right belief, it's the wrong one, the wrong perspective.
Your education can expose you to belief systems that are not consistent with the Bible, and if you don't question those, like I began to believe in evolution years ago when I went away to college.
I mean, it's Charles Darwin. Come on, that's in college. It's being taught in college. Why, they're not wrong.
Those were professors, and I didn't read the Bible at that time. So, and there's other world religions like Hindus, for example, teach many gods and all kinds.
Islam, God, but they don't believe in Christ. And so you have a lot of misinformation out there that you can believe in.
It's amazing to see how many different belief systems are out there. I go to a lot of recovery meetings and work with people in addiction, and they have a statement that's, we believe in a higher power. And it kind of leaves that open to you to decide who your higher power is.
Just go to the Knoxville Church Directory and see how many denominations there are. And how much the doctrine changes and shifts. Well, is that the God of the Bible? Because we have all these different faiths and different religions. There's only one God as far as I know, and only one Jesus, and he's found in the Bible.
It's in John 14:6, and Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
No one comes to the Father except through me.
That's
period.
Right.
I mean, that's the narrowest path that I can think of.
Not everybody believes that, but I do. I believe that, and that's what the Bible teaches.
Well, let's go on to question 5. It says, are nuns, and this I found interesting, are nuns spiritual instead of religious? Well, the survey says that about half say spirituality is very important in their lives, or say they think of themselves as spiritual. Most nuns believe animals other than humans can have spirits or spiritual energies, and many say this is true of parts of nature, such as mountains, rivers, or trees. That may be where you get into Wicca and some of the other beliefs and things like that.
I have met with Wiccans, yes, and they do believe there's power in nature.
But these spiritual identities and beliefs are not unique to nuns. In fact, by many measures, people who identify with a religion trend to be just as spiritual or even more spiritual than nuns. Found that kind of interesting. These surveys, you just don't know what's going on in people's heads. But anyway, Question 6,
Okay.
are nuns hostile towards religion? That's a good question to ask. Some nuns have a very negative view of religion, but nuns on the whole express mixed views rather than outright hostility.
Okay, mixed views
Right.
rather than outright hostility. All right.
Most say religion causes a variety of problems in society, like intolerance or superstition. Well,
Yes.
I get that,
Uh-huh.
because intolerance is just what you were talking about in John 14.
Yeah. Oh,
6 is
yeah.
that we're intolerant. Well, there's only one way. Well, how come I can't get to heaven? I mean, why does it have to be through Jesus? Why don't all? Well, that's not what God teaches his people.
Yeah, that
You know,
if I were not a believer in Christ, I would look at this as being, exclusive and
yeah, very
and so-
narrow, not inclusive, very superstitious. But many nuns also say that religion helps give people meaning and purpose, and that it can encourage people to treat others well. Well, you know what? You can't have it all. People want their candy and they want, their dessert too. And
Yeah.
you can't, there are concessions that we make when we become a follower of Christ.
Yes.
So, but it was very interesting to see this survey and the way people felt about it. To me, and here again, I use the word, it's not meant to be derogatory, but ignorance. It's ignorance of the fact, not having all the facts in the right perspective that you need to assess what the Bible teaches.
There's a term I hear in the recovery community. It's called contempt without investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear something like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, or you hear biblical teachings, a lot of people just reject those outright without actually investigating the claims that are being made.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
that's not a. We should carefully and look at things and read it and be sure you know what you're rejecting before you reject it.
Right. Well, exactly. So, how do nuns view science? Well, I'm going to kind of skip through this one. It's a good one, but most nuns say science does more harm or does more good than harm in American society. And on average, nuns are much more positive about science than are religiously affiliated people. At the same time, most nuns believe that there are limits to what science can do. For example, 44% of nuns say there is scientific explanation for everything, while 56% say there are some things science can't possibly explain. Well, that is very true. And, science is built on a foundation of factual
Yes.
items leading to truth.
Yes.
And that's why people, I think, have a tendency to do it. But how can you explain the death of Christ on the cross? Or how can you, scientifically, you can't explain someone coming back from the dead.
Yeah.
So it therefore leads to doubt, but that's where faith has to fill in that gap. Hebrews 11:1, for faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen.
Yeah.
So science and religion aren't quite on the same page, but there's a gap of faith there that we lack.
Yes.
That we have to have before we can actually believe in the one true God and to have the relationship. So,
That science, I don't believe they've ever explained life, how it came to be, or why is it that there is life.
right,
And we all know there's a certainty of death,
sure.
but the afterlife, or is there a resurrection and all the things the Bible teaches, those are not really scientifically provable, the best I can tell. They're matters you take by faith.
Exactly.
And then it comes down to who are you going to believe? concerning those issues.
Your choice.
Your choice.
Your
yes.
free will of believing, and we're going to get into that
Yeah.
in another few episodes. But this is laying a really good foundation for what we're going to talk about over the next 2 or 3, 4 episodes. Here's another good question that they ask: how do nuns think about morality? Okay, these are atheists, agnostics, and non-affiliation. Okay, the vast majority of nuns say it is possible to be moral and have good values without believing in God. Well, I can't argue with that. Most religiously affiliated people agree, though, by a smaller margin. And I've got a little chart there that you can see on the screen.
Well, how do you define good?
Well, I know we can get what's the standard that we
Who gets
go
to
by?
Yeah.
Most people believe that they are good because they have been raised by good parents. They live by the golden rule. They believe. If you look at the chart here, the desire to avoid hurting people, 83%. Logic and reasoning, 82%. Those are the top 2.
Yeah.
It feels good to do right, not wrong, 69%. Desire to stay out of trouble, 60%. Way they were raised, 52%.
Wow.
Belief that what goes around comes around, that's 46%. Religious.
I still hear that quite a bit.
So it's a belief that they have, but then what happens when our desire to avoid hurting people, we have a deep desire not to hurt people, 83%. Well, what happens when you get hurt yourself? What happens when you get devastated? Look at what happened to the officer that was killed in Maryville just this past week. And, they just buried him this past week. And they look at the man that killed him. Well, his desire wasn't to avoid hurting people.
Yeah.
But now retribution for the 5 kids that he left behind and the wife, you got to know she's got to be feeling anger and a desire for even the chief of police got on the news and said, yeah, we're looking for the death penalty. Well, isn't that a desire to hurt people? What's the standard of good?
Yeah.
And so if we don't have a clear definition, foundation, then it's up to us to what we define as being good, which is what you were alluding to.
There are people who do vandalize like the Constitution, and they think they're doing good. And they're trying to make a point about the
Their
environment.
right to protest.
Yes, and there are people that are sitting in streets nowadays and blocking traffic, and they think that's good. But the other people that are in the traffic don't think it's good.
Yeah.
So who's right and who's wrong, or that's an issue.
Yeah.
What's your standard?
So I wrote down a little thing here. I'm going to read it because we've gone through all 8 chapters. But folks want to be in a group working toward and having common goals, utilizing their abilities for the greater goal. That could be BLM, Black Lives Matter. That could be those that you were talking about vandalizing the Constitution.
Yes, they do have a group and they're active.
And they think they're doing good by doing that. They have a common goal,
Yeah.
utilizing their abilities for a greater goal that's bigger than themselves.
We're part of a group too. We're promoting something we believe in.
Yes, absolutely. So it gives them individual value within and a sense of community, belonging to something they are contributing to and believing in.
Yes.
The sense of community can be found in both groups, evil and good.
Yes.
We can be led incorrectly, wrongly in evilness, as well as being led incorrectly in what we believe as being good.
I interact with people that belong to gangs,
Mhm.
and there's a strong sense of loyalty.
Community,
And,
yes.
Yeah, they're part of something bigger than themselves, and they're
Yeah.
welcomed and accepted.
And they find value in that.
They do.
They value themselves in that.
They
you know?
identify with that group, and they're
That
accepted.
sense of belonging to someone and something.
Yeah.
So when the community changes, though, its goals no longer supports the common goal. Either people leave or become passive.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. When the community changes its goals,
Yeah,
that person may not adopt those goals any longer, so they leave.
right.
That would explain why the churches are diminishing, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Exactly my
All right.
point. So that could be why, when we were talking about this Pew Research, why people are leaving churches today. Why
Now.
people are not affiliating, this 28% are non-affiliating with a religion. Because the standard shift. They look at and I can't name them all, but they look at the Presbyterian churches, they look at the Methodist churches, they look at the Baptists, they look at the
Yes.
Church of Christ, and no one can agree on any one particular standard.
I have never seen such division in the organized religious,
Yeah.
the bigger denominations. They're having splits within themselves over different issues.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of confusion or chaos, I guess. And that's what this is. When the community changes its goals,
Right.
and no longer supports the common goal.
That's why that's why I use the word community.
Yes.
Community could mean religious community. It could mean the Satanic community,
Yes.
the Wicca community, the BLM community. It could apply to any community.
Yeah.
And as we go through these studies over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about these very subjects. Only a few decades ago, a Christian identity was so common among Americans that it could almost be taken for granted. Back in the
Yes.
40s and 50s, we came out of World War II stronger as a nation, believing that we're one nation under God because we had a common goal,
Yeah.
and we
would rally around the flag or
Yeah.
patriotism, and
Yeah.
that's not the norm anymore.
So, as recently as the early 1990s, about 90% of U.S. adults identified as Christians. As early as 1990s, 90% of U.S. adults identified as Christians. But today, about 2/3 of adults are Christians. The change in America's religious composition is largely the result of large numbers of adults switching out of the religion in which they were raised to become religiously unaffiliated. This is the Pew survey.
This is
Saying
amazing.
this.
Yeah.
In other words, a steadily shrinking share of young adults who were raised Christian in childhood have retained their religious identity in adulthood over the past 30 years. At the same time, having no religious affiliation has become stickier. A declining percentage of people raised without a religion have converted or taken on a religion later in life. And I've got a bunch of charts here that show Christianity and Christians, and back in the 90s and where we're at now, and percentages, and how there's a decline in religion. There are many theories on why disaffiliation sped up so much in the 90s and how long this trend might continue. For example, some scholars contend that secularization is the result of increasing existential security as societal conditions improve and scientific advances allow people to live longer lives with fewer worries about meeting basic needs. They have less need for religion to cope with insecurity.
Oh, I see. Oh my! I noticed a number up here. About half of Americans in their 20s
Right.
are Christian,
Yep.
compared with over 80% of the oldest Americans.
Yes.
That number, that's really a trend I hadn't been aware of. That's good.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
my goodness.
So,
Alarming.
when we talk about age, or education, politics, geography tied to differences in religious switching, a closer look at the characteristics of adults who have left Christianity and are now religiously unaffiliated indicates that other traits such as age, gender, education, political identity, and region of residence are also tied to disaffiliation. So if you look at age,
Okay.
U.S. adults who have moved away from Christianity are younger on average, that makes sense, than those who have remained Christian after a Christian upbringing. More than a quarter of former Christians, 27%, are under 30, compared with 14% of all adults who were raised Christian and remain Christian. Gender. Americans who have moved away from Christianity are more likely to be men, while women are more likely to retain their Christian identity. Imagine that. A slight majority of U.S. adults who were raised Christian are now unaffiliated. 54% are male. Among people who have remained Christian, 57% are women.
Okay.
All right? Us
Okay.
men, we got to step up to the plate, buddy. I'm just telling you.
Well, these are disturbing numbers, aren't they?
Very. Education. People who have become unaffiliated after a Christian upbringing are a little more likely to have graduated college than those who remain Christian, with 35 and 31% respectively holding college degrees. Well, we talked about that the more educated, the more learned, are less likely to be affiliated
Yes.
religiously.
The college campuses are quite different now than they were when I was there.
And me too.
Yeah.
I totally see a total difference. Politics. 7 in 10 adults who were raised Christian but are now unaffiliated are Democrats or Democrat-leaning independents. I'm not trying to make a plug for November, okay?
Okay.
Compared with 43% of those who remain Christian and 51% of U.S. adults overall. Some scholars argue that disaffiliation from Christianity is driven by an association between Christianity and political conservatism that has intensified in recent decades.
Oh, that's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
7? Okay.
So I'm thinking what this is saying is if you're more liberal, you're less likely to be religious, which I believe to be true. The more conservative you are, the more likely you are to be religious.
Yes,
I guess is what it's saying.
That looks like what the numbers are saying there.
Okay. Geography. People who have left Christianity are underrepresented in the South, where 33% of former Christians live, compared with 42% of people who have remained Christian and 38% of U.S. adults overall.
Okay.
Those who are disaffiliated after being raised Christian are more likely than others to live in the West.
Oh.
I'm going to skip over some of this. Surveys often find that U.S. adults tend to be more religious on a number of measures in the South and less so in the West and Northeast. This may indicate that people adapt to the religious context in which they live and or sort themselves into like-minded communities.
There are differences that I can see in certain parts of the country. It's more crime and more homelessness and more drug use, and
Yeah.
it's more than I see here.
Look at Portland,
I-
where the drugs are wild and free, and people, squat on other people's property and
Yeah.
take it over. And it's like there's no law to
Yeah.
keep, and it's like the Wild West.
Businesses are closing because they can't operate in that environment, and there's those are typically I don't see that much in the Bible Belt.
Right.
But I see it in these areas they're describing here.
It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming. We're going to discuss more and more of this as we go on in the next few episodes. But here again, this is a good foundation to lay
Yeah.
for our future episodes.
This is good to get an overview of the whole scenario, what kind of world we're living in now.
So, you know, we grow up as adults and we become adults. And we don't forget the lessons that we learned as children.
Yes.
You know, we remember those events in our life that form our opinion of others. But it wasn't until I come to the knowledge and the truth of biblical worldview and belief as to how we're supposed to respond to childhood conflicts, childhood events. In other words, I was in the world at the time, right?
Yes,
We were in the world. Now we're taken out of it by biblical worldview belief. And now we have a foundation that doesn't shift. My friendship with him shifted,
Yes.
but my friendship with the Lord will never shift. It'll stay constant and the same. And he proves himself day after day after day that I can trust him.
Yes. That's the bottom line. You want to have a standard you can really go by.
Right. Yeah. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about in another episode. We're going to be talking about suffering, and then evilness, and then about Satan and what he really is and what he looks like.
Who is behind that type of thing?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
There you go. All right. So anyway, I felt that was a good episode. I feel like we needed to get that word out, and I appreciate everyone being with us today. And I just hope that people will stay tuned and stay tuned in and listen to all four. But you know,
The world is changed. It's changed in the last 50 years. It's not
it's rapidly changing now.
Yeah. Wasn't in 1990, 90% were Christians.
Yeah.
And here in 2024, it's far less than you can see the decline in Christianity.
Yeah.
Or,
And there's reasons for that, and we're going to discuss that over the course of the next 3 or 4 episodes.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay?
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Word.
And may God richly bless you.